Thank you very much, the early ones, to join us in this webinar about the hidden costs of poor risk management. Thank you very much for your submit, the registration, and early connecting. So let's start with our speaker. He's Dr. Mike Clayton. Dr. Mike, he's the author of Risk Happens. He's a prolific author, trainer, and speaker. He also founded onlinepmcourses.com. He also has a great YouTube channel. I think one of the best videos about project management or even risk management that I ever watched is from him. I'm learned a lot from him. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining and to accept this invitation. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm looking forward to this. This is it's a really good topic that you've chosen for me to speak about, and I've enjoyed preparing for this. So yeah.
Great. So I don't know if I think we can start right now.
I think Patricia's just noted in the Q&As that the chat is disabled, so I don't know whether at your end you can fix that.
Oh.
While you do that, I'm gonna just share my screen with everyone.
Yeah, so in the meantime, I'm gonna watch why the chat is disabled. That's
okay. So what we got here. So welcome everyone. This is really good. We're going to talk about the costs of poor risk management, and we're going to break it into a number of parts. We're going to start off by asking ourselves, what does poor risk management look like? I want to kind of paint a picture for you of what the environment is like, and then I'll be bringing Alejandro in from time to time just to give his perspective on these things. We'll then actually look at the actual hidden costs, why it really matters to you, why it should matter to you, the consequences to your organization. Then we'll actually find out, how can you survey your organization? What can you actually look at and see and spot the red flags, the signs that you need to do something? And let's hope you don't. But if you do need to do something, the last thing I'll be talking about is then what are the broad brush steps you need to take to fix your risk management culture and restore your organization onto a path of developing good risk management. And then I'll hand back to Alejandro, who's going to talk through some experiences that he's had working with his clients to understand this process, and then we'll open it up to questions, which for me, I don't know about you, Alejandro, but that's my favorite bit, because that's the bit I've been able to prepare for. I don't know what you're going to ask, so I feel like I know what I'm going to say. The real excitement for me is in the new stuff that people ask. So do feel free to pop questions in the Q&A as we go. If I spot one and I think the time is good, I'll take it then. If I think we need to carry on, we'll put that back to the end and select from the best questions. So we'll start with, what does poor risk management look like? And I think as you go around an organization, the sorts of things you'll see is, first of all, there will be effects on the culture and the attitudes you find in people. It will be almost as if risk is not much more than an afterthought. It's something that, we do our risk assessments because we have to, because the audit and the assurance people are onto us. We don't use those assessments for anything meaningful in a business sense. We don't make decisions based on it. We don't help inform our strategy. It doesn't even constrain our strategy. And I think one of the things we really kind of notice is people, don't really worry about things going wrong, which I'm not advocating that we live in a culture where everyone's worried all the time, but I do suggest that if we're not preparing ourselves for the possibility that something can go wrong, we are putting our organizations and our careers at risk. There's also a sense of people not talking about what they're worried about. They're afraid to speak up. Managers ask their teams to make sure things look good and don't raise risk, and there's almost a sense of the blame culture that if risks do occur, someone's going to get blamed for it. So if I keep my head down, then nothing will go wrong. And if it does go wrong, it'll be someone else's problem. It's almost as if when things do go wrong, all people care about is finding someone to blame and not so much worrying about how do we learn from this. Anything you'd add to that, Alejandro?
Oh, I was muted. But just before that, I think I just habilitated the chat. So please, Patricia, thank you for letting it. Oh, okay, yes. I think Martinez says he's from South Africa. Oh, great. So now you can put in the chat or your questions or your opinions or what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So your question again, Dr. Clayton, is...
I just wondered if you observed any other aspects of culture and attitude, or if any of those particularly resonate with your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the overall, I think, is some companies think that risk management is a technology challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it's a cultural challenge.
Yeah.
So if the company thinks that is just buy a software or do some technology, or that the software or the technology gonna do the work from them, is I think the big red flag of poor risk management. So, and I am the CEO of a risk management software, so this is like counterintuitive, but it's like, in my experience, there's definitely you need to contemplate both aspects.
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of this comes down to leadership. If senior leaders are not consistent in their focus on risk as part of their decision-making processes, as part of their strategic direction, then people are they're going to follow that lead and put risk to one side. And I think one of the things I think is really noticeable is that strategy isn't informed by a sense of what is our risk appetite. Every organization has a risk appetite. The problem is that not all of them know what it is. And because of that, individual managers, individual leaders will make decisions which may be entirely contradictory with the risk appetite. And there's no reason why one organization can't have different risk appetite in different functions, in different divisions, but that has to be a meaningful and a deliberate choice that says this division at this time needs to be taking risks in order to catch up with its or get ahead of its competitors. This division, we're reliant on a steady stream of income. So at the moment, in the next business cycle, its risk appetite needs to be low, and all the decisions need to follow from that. And I think that then leads leaders to focus on a governance process which is all about compliance and tick boxes and audit and assurance, rather than risk is a part of business. And when that happens, we then find that we don't have any proper processes and systems in place. And you said some people see risk management as technological, but actually I worry that a lot of organizations don't have any solid technology solutions. They're only really one step above making a note in a notebook. They're using spreadsheets, static risk registers, which get updated when someone feels like it, and because they're on a shared drive, they could be corrupted. There's no live, properly thought out, database driven enterprise-wide solutions, and that means we're not able to look at the interdependencies between different parts of the organization. We're not able to look at the cumulative impact of all the risks the organization is taking across the organization. The risk you're taking in your part of the organization may be fine, but when you combine it with other risks, and particularly when those risks can interact with one another, that could be explosive. So we then end up with people really only focusing on dealing with risks after something goes wrong rather than actually heading it off. Um, and I think the last thing I would say is that in this world where data analytics are rapidly rising to the fore of everyone's thinking in the business world, I see too few examples of organizations which are probably properly gathering and using data to inform their risk judgments. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, another thing that actually I put in the chat last week, I think you published in your YouTube channel the 15 risk management myths,
Yeah,
and one of the that resonates the most with me is like this idea of we do risk management to stop or to control or to mitigate all the risks, and all the risks are bad and we need to eliminate them. So it's funny because there's a lot of company that is still talking about we need to eliminate risks, and the
yeah,
risk is something bad and we do risk management to protect the company. And I think that's definitely one important aspect, but I also think that with no risks, no story to tell. The
absolutely.
companies that grow, that are successful, are the companies that take risks. So the management need to contemplate, of course, the defensive perspective, but also what are the risks that you're going to embrace and take in order to grow.
Yeah,
I, I think please take a look at that video of Dr. Mike. That is very, I think it's very, very important to
yeah,
think
yeah,
about it.
absolutely. And anyone who takes away from this session that either of us is advocating that you get rid of risk, you completely missed the point. Our absolute commitment is that risk is an important part of business, but if it's so important, we have to manage it. We have to invest our time in being sure we understand what risks we're taking and uh, track them and deal with them proactively. So um, let's just take a quick summary of the four themes that I've covered there. There's culture and attitudes, leadership and governance, processes and systems, and tools and methods. And all of those are build the picture of what's going on in the organization. And shortly, I'm going to really narrow some of this down into specific red flags that we can pay attention to, so that we can assess it. But before we do, I do want to say something about what these hidden costs are, because it really does matter. It really does matter if you are not properly paying attention to risk in your business, in your organization, or from my point of view, because my background is in project management, in your project, in your program, in your portfolio of initiatives and changes. Whatever level you're working, whether you're leading a small team within a big division, or whether you're an entrepreneur building your first startup, or whether you're the chief executive of a global Fortune 500 company, it's all the same. The costs are the same. It's just the scale will be different. And the first, I think, key thing, which I've already alluded to quite a lot, is if you're not dealing with risks properly, then there will be a disconnect between the business's strategy and the initiatives you choose to pursue and the risks you're taking. Without an understanding of what your risk appetite is, then you might find different parts of your business are pursuing initiatives which really extend not just beyond the risk appetite, but significantly beyond the tolerance of the organization to bear the risk. And so you may find that parts of your business, or indeed individual business leaders within your business, are taking risks in their choices and the initiatives they're pursuing that put the whole organization at risk. But on the other side, if people aren't sure what the risk appetite is, then they may not be taking risks, as Alejandro said, that could transform the organization in the right sense, in the right way. If you don't properly understand risk, then, and you don't have the systems, then innovation becomes too risky. You don't want to do it, and that leads to stagnation. And all of that ties together to create an organization where you might have pockets of too much risk, pockets of not enough risk. And as a result of not understanding risk, even if this isn't happening, decision cycles are slowing down because people are having to effectively ask the questions from scratch every time. This leads to poor decisions. And the other thing I think is key is that if you're not properly understanding the risks you're taking, then when things do go wrong, there's a chance that nobody will take the time to understand what went wrong, why it went wrong, and reflect on that and put things right for the future. So strategic issues, misalignments are the first area where I would say risk management has a palpable cost to organizations. And as I say, it might be putting the organization at too much risk. It might be putting the organization at not enough risk, so it's not innovating, or it may simply result in a range of poor decision-making processes, too slow, too inefficient, bad decisions, and failure to learn from mistakes.
So, Mike, if I
Yeah.
understand, you're telling that leaders should promote a culture when asking their teams, what are the risks that are you taking? Is not the what are the risks that are you aren't taking or running away from?
Well, I think the culture should start with saying, this initiative, this team at this date, at this time, in the next business cycle, our function is in the mood for a lot of risk or is in the mood for very little risk. And actually, rather than asking a team what risks they're taking, it should start with setting out the level of risk the team should be bearing and then looking for business choices along the way that conform to that. And again, one business choice might take too much risk, but if that's balanced by another choice that takes less risk, again, it's a portfolio. At whatever level of your organization you're working in, there should be a portfolio of choices and decisions, but the total overall risk of all of those choices interacting should be one that the organization has decided is appropriate to that part of the organization at that time. And that's why I think, you know, much as I grew up as a project manager with using spreadsheets as risk registers, and on small projects, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. But when we're talking about organization wide, a spreadsheet cannot in any way present you with the information you need to assess the overall risk to your organization. It can just give you a kind of sense of what could go wrong. For serious business, strategic business decisions, you need to be able to survey the whole thing, I think. Obviously, if you get the strategy wrong, that's going to have financial implications. We can't ignore that. And of course, when we talk about the hidden costs, that's what people immediately think of. What are the dollars? What are the euros? What are the yen that that we're going to be paying out? And I suppose again, if you take too much risk, there is a possibility of unanticipated loss. From risks materializing that you didn't prepare for, which requires expensive recovery, possibly damage to margins, possibly damage to reputation, all of that. I don't think anyone on listening to this webinar is going to need me to tell you all the costs you can incur when risks happen in your business. But that said, anyone who is leading a business or a part of a business should know what those losses could be for the types of risk they're anticipating so that they can, again, make conscious choices about whether that risk is acceptable. The flip side of that, of course, is the cost of missed opportunity, the opportunity cost of not doing something strategically because you don't make a choice to take that risk means that you may lose out on innovations, you may lose market share. Indeed, there are many business school case studies of organizations which saw change coming in their industry but decided to double down on their old strategy, and they don't exist anymore. The one that I always kind of go back to is Kodak building one of the first digital cameras, but then deciding that it was going to stick to film cameras. And Where is
So
Kodak now? It's a niche business.
okay, so we can say like the because I mean for the question that are in the presentation, what are the hidden costs that often go unnoticed? Is like basically lost opportunities.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah. But also, if even if you don't have a big risk materializing, so we've got this kind of unanticipated loss, but if you're not properly managing your risk, if you've just got a risk culture which is not properly anticipating all the risks, not allocating responsibilities to people to deal with them, not proactively reducing the level of threat, putting in place contingency plans, then when risks materialize, you're going to have people involved in dealing with the consequences who are therefore not doing what they were supposed to be doing in the business plan. That firefighting, that crisis management, last minute fixes, they may be trivial individually, but again, across an organization, that adds up. And for anyone who says, well, hang on a moment, that's why we take out insurance. Insurance, first of all, is expensive. You can reduce your premium significantly by effectively self-insuring by having a good risk management strategy, but also you can reduce your premiums if your insurer sees that fewer things go wrong. So there's a very simple relationship between your risk management approach and the cost of various insurance premiums, from professional indemnities for service organizations to health and safety related insurances to construction businesses. Whatever business you're in, you need insurance because your insurance is one way of managing risk. If you manage other aspects of your risk better, then your insurance premiums go down simply because you're claiming less often. Um, but there are all sorts of other things. There's operational inefficiencies, duplication of effort because different people are managing the same risk because you don't have a consolidated risk register. The need to put aside reserves for everything you do because you don't have a consolidated sense of what your contingencies need to be. The disruptions, the inefficiencies that come up with that. I started my whole piece with the cultural signs of poor risk management. And of course, there are cultural impacts as well. If things go wrong, people become demoralized and people don't trust their colleagues, especially if you're living in a blame culture, because then people are frightened to make decisions and they don't trust that their colleagues aren't going to rat on them if they think that they can get out of it. So actually, a poor risk management culture can quickly descend into a very, very unpleasant workplace environment where people are scared that if they shout out that they've spotted a risk, they'll get shouted down, blamed for it if it happens, and so that will result in low morale. That results in absences due to stress. That results into high turnover of staff, and high turnover of staff, of course, costs huge amounts in replacing staff. Anyone who's run a business knows that when someone who is an otherwise good employee leaves, not only do they have the costs of hiring their replacement, but they have a significant period of time when their replacement is getting up to speed, and therefore they're losing efficiency. And finally, we must talk about compliance. You know, how many people on this call? I mean, I could say, put in the comments, if you work in an industry or a sector where there is some measure of regulation, whether it's from a government regulator, whether it's from an industry standards regulator, but that can lead to anything from reputational damage to penalties in contracts to fines, even to loss of license to operate, or indeed, in some cases, in some jurisdictions, like in the UK, we have corporate manslaughter. Senior people within organisations can be taken to court and prosecuted because of accidents that were where there is a contribution of poor risk management, made that accident more likely in such a way that the officer of the organisation could reasonably have expected that outcome. So you could lose your liberty if you're a senior person in an organization simply because you're not properly managing your risks. Uh, so those are that's my kind of long list of risks, and I'm sure of costs. I'm sure there are plenty more lurking in the shadows. Anything you'd add to that, Alejandro?
Yeah, I just reading the chat is unfortunately Martinez have to leave
Oh
before the
no.
half an hour, but he put he put some comment in the chat that I really think resonates with it. We just talk. It's like business is risk for reward, no
Yeah.
risks, no reward.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think definitely are. And so for your question about okay, what are the again the summary of the hidden costs that often go unnoticed, like so the reputational compliance risks, besides the loss opportunities, and the
Mm.
people and culture impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to Martina's point, business no risk, no reward. But what I would say is your business will fail if you are taking risks and still getting no rewards. Yeah, the problem that we're focusing on is really where you are exposing your business to risk because you are not managing that risk, and that will reduce the reward. So let's just summarize what I've said in this section. So for me, the themes for what are the hidden costs? Those hidden costs are around strategic misalignment, the direct financial and strategic costs, operational inefficiencies, reputation and compliance risks, and the impact of people and culture on people and culture, which can be quite significant. And this is where I think we'll mention the first of three checklists, which you and I have collaborated to produce, to develop for this webinar, which I think are available from your website. These are three checklists in kind of Google Sheets format that anyone can download if they've signed up for this webinar. And my advice is adapt them to your business. Change the terminology to the language that's appropriate for your business. Obviously, once you've downloaded it, you can open it in whatever spreadsheet software you use, and then you can use your language. You can even translate it into your local language. You can add sections that you think we've missed. And of course, you can delete things that are not relevant to your business. So I would never advocate anyone takes a template and just uses it as is uncritically. Adapt it to your purpose and your situation. So the first of those is the impacts. So you can kind of check off and see what impacts you're noticing in your business. But what I want to go on to next is what are the red flags that will help you to recognize that you might be at risk. So what sort of things can you actually survey and find? And again, this comes under the headings of culture and attitude, leadership and governance, processes and systems, and tools and methods. So the first of those is culture and attitudes. And one of the things you will notice, I guess, is that psychological safety starts to suffer. People are reluctant to speak up, and they don't challenge authority because they are worried that they will be blamed. And this leads to a culture of fear, and risks don't get identified. And also, if risks aren't identified, the threat goes up, they become more likely and potentially more severe if they do. Another cultural thing that we tend to see is that people have too much confidence in the controls that are in place because they don't challenge them. Um, there's not enough testing, there's not enough validation of ideas. People just use paperwork for protection. There's a three-letter acronym used certainly in the UK, CYA, cover your ass. You put it in writing so that you can't be blamed. well, that isn't risk management, that isn't risk control, that's just a dysfunctional behavior. If you know there is something, rather than cover your ass, sort it out. Um, and I guess I'm not sure whether this is really a cultural thing, but it certainly arises from a cultural thing, and it's very easy to test. Um, is there actually good quality risk training available to everyone who needs it and can use it? Or is it minimal or superficial or completely absent, like maybe a once a year, 1 hour module that people are asked to take online and there's no checking? Um, because it's vital that everyone who is making decisions or acting on decisions needs to understand how to contribute to the organization's risk management. And that training needs to be tailored to different roles and to different levels in the organization, but it needs to tie into the organization's approach to managing risk. And that brings us to leadership and governance. And I think the first red flag is that executives talk about risk in terms of compliance and what we have to do to satisfy the auditors or the evaluators from the certification agencies, and having talked about how important it is, they then delegate it to people at a relatively junior level, and they do not take responsibility for it themselves. And we know why that matters. It's because no organization takes things seriously if those things are not led from the top. John Cotter found that if you want to make change and 70% of the senior management aren't aligned, if you don't have a minimum of 70% aligned, that change won't happen. So this needs to be owned at board level. Non-executives need to be interrogating the board about it. Executives need to be dividing up the responsibilities between them and putting their time and their intellects and authority behind it, rather than just saying, have you filled in the form today? Now, there's another aspect of this, I think, with leadership, which is we've kind of covered it in many ways now, including the comment that you read out from Martinez, this idea that we actually need to be taking risks. But if there is a mindset at leadership level that risks and risk management gets in the way of doing the things we want to do, then we get into trouble. I think you wanted to say something, Alejandro.
Yeah, it's like I think that for the information that have you shared in this red flags is like, again, there's a culture aspect of all of this,
Yeah.
and the leadership and governance. So you mentioned that everyone or every team should be doing risk management, but I think also in some sad reality is like the risk team is doing risk management and
Yeah.
the process teams are doing their jobs.
Yeah.
So it's like you can say that a red flag is the only team doing risk management is the risk team, but also there is some like, because not just to say no, the risk management team is good, they're no one understand the risk team, but all this the other side of the coin, that is the core teams or the teams that are doing the job. They say no, but you know why, the risk team is the no team, is
Yeah.
the team
Absolutely.
that say no, you can do that, you no, that's not good, no, that's not for compliance. So there's like a war between the risk management team and the, I don't know, the processes or the core team. So
Yeah.
how do you identify this tension or this war or this big
I don't think
big
it's
red
hard.
flag?
If I were going to do an assessment, and if I were going to start, I'd start with the template which is in the pack on red flags. I'd adapt it to my organization, and then quite simply, I would wander around, chat with people, ask some questions, but I'd also uh, arrange some formal interviews and take them through it. But everyone, it will be a common, in some organizations, it will be a common attitude that, risk management people or the audit people or whoever it is, the assurance people, they get in the way of us doing the things we need to do. Now, sometimes they will be quite rightly getting in the way because you're about to take a silly risk. But sometimes they won't. They will be actually just trying to make sure that if you do something that has risk, you think about that risk and you manage it so that you can do it safely because their interest is in the organization thriving. So that's the leadership, the government's risk processes and systems. I'd be looking for red flags around lack of stated risk appetite and risk tolerance, risk siloed in exactly the way if risk is all siloed into one risk management function or one audit function, that would be a red flag to me. If it's not a responsibility of every senior manager and every manager, and if it's not integrated properly into planning and performance reviews and strategic updates. And the other thing I'd be looking at is what are the tools and methods that people are using to manage risk? Is it a once a year stand up risk identification session and everything gets fed into a static spreadsheet at one end of the spectrum? And frankly, there are some organizations that don't even do that. Or is there a systematic approach to data collection, analysis, feeding it into a well-structured risk management tool? I know Pirani has a great tool, but I think there are competitors which I'm sure have other good tools to offer. What matters in terms of your risk culture is not that you have one specific tool, but that you have sourced a tool which works for your organization and you have implemented it properly and you've trained your people. And I think one of the things that I've most enjoyed about working with Pirani is your commitment to making to providing this education. So do the tools that the organization use kind of flow through everything that's done, everything that is being done, every decision-making process. So if we look at the themes again, we've got culture and attitudes, leadership and governance, processes and systems, and tools and methods, and all of that is reflected in the assessment template tool checklist that we put together. Yeah.
Mike, just a question because I'm very curious. But when you mention one red flag is when teams do identifying risk once a year.
Yeah.
That's their process. But based on your experience, so what's the right answer? It's like it's okay. It's once a year is red flag, but what is good? Like green flag.
Well, good depends on what you're doing. If you're running a static operation, if your team's job is to run a static operation where you apply good principles of Kaizen to improve it incrementally, but fundamentally what you're doing today hasn't changed since the start of last year, then you probably can get away with once or twice a year getting the team together. What's happened? What are the incidents? What things have But if you're in an entrepreneurial division of your business and you're creating new products and looking at growing markets, then you should be doing this on at least a quarterly basis. But the reality is that the senior team within that part of the business should be looking at the risks whenever they meet, whenever they're discussing strategic or tactical moves. And by the way, I think I was looking again at the checklist that we put together and thinking about how would I do this if I the three categories that we came up with are no concern, minor threat, and red flag. And I think, a minor threat and a red flag, I would not score those the same. I would not even score the red flag, the minor threat at 1 and the red flag at 2. I would go for, maybe a ratio of 1 to 4. I think we've actually came up with a list of about 25 indicators. So that kind of works well. If you score 1s and 4s, if someone gets a red flag on all 20, on all 25, that's 100. And I was thinking, if I scored my organization at less than 25, I wouldn't be worried too much. Obviously I'd look to make some improvements over time, but I'd have no serious concerns. If I'm over 26, I'd start to have real concerns. And if I'm getting past 40 or so, I'd see this as a priority. And frankly, if I'm getting past 50 or 60, I'd be wanting to, dive in and make changes now to the big areas. So the last thing I wanted to talk about before we look at some real life stuff, is the principles of how do you fix your risk management culture. And of course, I can't put together a plan for you, but I can suggest an agenda. And I've divided my agenda into 5 or 6 chunks, depends on how you kind of think about it. And the first is kind of phase one, which is the initiation phase. There's nothing clever about this, by the way. This is just what a project manager does. We just divide things up into phases. And my first phase would be an initiation phase where I'd first and foremost gain executive sponsorship. I would say to the senior leadership team, we need to do this, and I need you to give vocal support to it. The CEO, the executive team need to make this a priority. It's not a compliance thing. It is a business critical, possibly even an existential thing. And once I get the support, I would actually start to audit the culture. Find out what are the current behaviors, mindsets, what are the governance structures. And from that, I would try to establish a level of risk management maturity. So if we don't have one, I go to some reference works, go online, perhaps talk to some experts and come up with a risk management maturity model, which says, how can we benchmark where we are on this risk management maturity model and what's our next step? Where do we want to get to? And then phase two would be to start to build a plan. How can we make year-on-year improvements in our risk management? How can we define and communicate our tolerance for risk and our appetite for risk? And the difference is risk tolerance is about what you can bear as an organization, and risk appetite is what you choose to bear. So we should never really push your risk tolerance right to the risk tolerance boundary, I guess. And I'd start to think about how that interacts with our strategy, and I start to build that into our strategic processes. And then I'd be also thinking about how do we align our governance structures around this and get our roles and responsibilities and accountabilities all right. And then I'd start to appoint some champions, and build the project. And then the 3 areas of focus I'd have in third phase are going to be about the culture, about the processes, and about the tools. And culture always first. Build a culture of psychological safety where people feel like they're not going to get blamed, they're going to get celebrated for identifying risks and for acting on it. And I'd support that with all the capability growth and training that I could, and I'd reinforce that with the right incentives, the right recognition. And then I start to build the processes we need, understand how we want to go about managing risk, and then look for modern, reliable, robust tools that fit the processes we want and the culture of our organization, which will allow us to gather and analyze data. And if you are a small organization, I think it is okay to look for tools that work in your organization and build processes around those tools. If you're a big organization and you can afford to, then you can start to bespoke the tools around your organization. But for many organizations, if you don't have the in-house expertise, then look for reliable vendors like Pirani who have tools which have workflows embedded in them that allow you to say, you know what, this might not be absolutely perfect for our organization, but it looks to us like it does everything we need it to, and it will fit with the culture of the organization. People will enjoy using it, and then get it in. And as a project manager, I can't help but think in terms of agility and incrementalism. If you implement the wrong tool, or you make mistakes in your implementation, or your process isn't perfect, and a year later you realize you could do it better, then next year do it better. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of good enough. And that 6th element is then ongoing activities. How can you communicate the successes you're having, and create a culture of continuous improvement? So in summary, we've got our phased structure, which allows us to build a culture of risk management. And again, I put that into a simple description, a simple spreadsheet, which people can download. So, whoops, my apologies. I have made a mess of that. But back to you.
So in the meantime, so thank you, Mike, for that. So as you can see, Mike has shown us like three gifts, so a piece of content that were created for, from Mike in is published in Pirani's Academy. So I put it in the chat. I actually saw that some of you already download the kit. So as Mike showed us in the presentation, we have a kit for risk management culture diagnosis, and they have three different files. So one is the action. No, that's the last one is the action. The enterprise risk management improvement action plan is one. Another one is the impact of poor risk management checklist, and the risk culture red flag assessment checklist. So it's on a spreadsheet, so you can put the information based on the context or the names of your company, but you can work with that. So the key has the three files, and I really hope that you find valuable to start to have that hidden cost or the idea of risk management culture for that successful risk management. So I would like to get back a little bit because it's really interesting what you mentioned of the three aspects of culture, process, and tool. And now that you mentioned in Pirani, we're trying to we very believe in some of like that, because as I mentioned, we are the tool. We offer the tool of the software to do risk management. So in order to do that, we're trying to is as simple as possible to people in the company log in or use or get familiar with the tool, with the software. Is not very complex or like quantic scientific. is familiar, is friendly, but also we have invest a lot of in training or culture or materials. So that's why we have the academy with webinars and podcasts and ebooks and blog posts and interviews with a lot of content that help us to understand that, because you can maybe can have a Ferrari or Lamborghini of risk management, but you don't have the knowledge of the culture to take the most of the tool. You're gonna basically lose your investment. So you need to work in all three aspects, and I think that's very, very helpful. It's very easy to understand those three aspects. So I think you're gonna have the last question. Or...
Yeah. The last. Wow, my system is playing up. Bear with me. Don't understand what's going on here. Here we go. No, that's not right. Not right at all. Apologies. We were just going to ask for questions, really. So I won't bother to put a slide up which just says questions, even though your colleagues made a beautiful slide for us. But yeah, I'm keen to get questions. We've got about a dozen people on the live webinar. Has anybody got any questions that you'd like to ask either of us?
Yeah, I have one question here in the chat that you mentioned when you're talking about the culture, that is good to have the proper incentives for culture. What kind of incentives a company can implement is like economic, or what kind of incentives?
So a lot of organizations and certainly a lot of managers find that offering economic incentives is difficult to do. It's simply because you have your remuneration structures and stuff. But I certainly think it's quite possible that you can build good risk management behaviors and good attitudes to risk and contributing to risk management processes into people's job descriptions and the person specifications, and therefore the year-end appraisal processes, and actually say, well, Alejandro, you excellent in contributing to our risk management initiative. So that's a big tick in the box towards your next promotion or towards your pay rise. Or no, you didn't. We didn't see you contributing to the workshops we did. You didn't attend all the training that we've made available for you. So that is going to slow your progress down. But I think the best incentives are the ones that are actually around the relationships within the organization. And one organization I worked with relatively recently, I went to visit their offices, and they were on the third floor of a building. I got out of the lift, and straight opposite the lift was a huge, great, just an old-fashioned pin board, and there were loads of cards pinned to it, and each card was a printed card where one person had written, and it basically said, "I want to express my gratitude to so and so for doing this." And I came up and lived with some other people who get out, and we all gravitated to that and looked over them. And this was the organization saying, when our people celebrate contributions of their colleagues, we make it easy for them to do it, and we put it on display. And so it's the informal stuff. As a manager, as a business leader, one of the things you can do is tell someone when they've done something that you appreciate. And going up to them at a coffee machine, or getting on Zoom and calling them up and saying, "I just wanted to let you know that the work you did on making sure that we understood the risks to this initiative, and making sure that everyone knew what their responsibilities were. I thought that was brilliant. Thank you very much." That resonates with people. And if you then say, "I'm also going to put it in writing, I'm going to send that to you, and I'm going to put a copy on your personnel file," people feel good about that. So we don't have to do all sorts of clever things with, financial stuff. But also, why not, as part of your risk culture, say we are going to have an award ceremony? We're going to celebrate the contributions people make, the most unlikely risk that anyone identified which actually happened, or you come up with almost humorous ideas for things, some very, very serious, but don't celebrate the behaviors that you don't want. You don't want heroic, "I'm the hero, get out of my way while I fix things" behavior. What you want is collaborative, let's put our minds together and figure out how we're going to solve this kind of behaviors. Let's anticipate, let's ask difficult questions and check before we dive in. And so building into both your formal and informal structures ways to celebrate what you want, and if necessary, appropriate ways to let people know when they step out of line, when they take risks they're not supposed to take, or when they fail to take risks that actually they could have taken, but they didn't feel that they if I don't feel I can take a risk, and my manager hasn't made me feel like I can take the risk, and I've therefore missed an opportunity, then maybe my manager is at fault, and the organization needs to deal with that.
So I understand that incentives is not just about money or compensation, it's also about recognition and celebration of the attitudes that we want to have in the company.
Absolutely. What do people really value at work? They value, obviously, a sense of security. And frankly, if you don't behave well in towards risk, then you won't have that security, the organization. But after that, they value their sense of self-worth and their sense of status in an organization. And salary and promotions are only one measure of status and recognition by their colleagues. But actually, even, just in a Monday morning stand-up meeting, calling out someone, saying, "You did a fantastic job on that." It doesn't have to be the leader that does it. Just me standing up and saying, "Oh, look, I just want to just make sure everyone understands what Jane did the other day. She was fantastic. She did this. She didn't need to, but she took it on and dealt with it." And that will make her feel good inside, even if it makes her feel a little embarrassed on the outside. And we remember that. And so that's the sorts of things we should be doing.
Good. I have another question. I think when we talk about the risk management team saying no to the process team, so what do you think about this framework or this idea of the 3 lines of defense? Do you think it's outdated, or because there's plenty of possibly being that, "No, that's 280s, what do you think about the framework of three
We
lines of
we need
defense?
we need we need defense. We need to defend the organization. But I think back to the culture. The culture should make it such that the responsibility of an audit team, of a risk management team, should not be to prevent risks. It should be to create an environment where risk taking is properly considered and managed, and that way uh, we can create it. So if you can remind me what the three lines of defense are, I have come across it, and it's not coming back to my mind. I know it's something about the different levels of the organization. So whether it's up from
Exactly, it's like
the
the
risk
first line
management
of
team up to the
defense.
operational team, isn't it?
Exactly. The first line is the operational team, is the, I don't know, the sales
Yeah,
team is doing risk management of the sales process of
yeah.
the whole cycle of sales. And then the second line will be the risk and compliance team. And the third line will be the audit team.
Ah, right. Yes, I'd forgotten about it. Yeah. So the way I see it, the ideal is that that first line, the operational team, should be making informed decisions about what risks to take, how risky a particular decision is, and then managing that risk actively. If they
Okay.
are doing that, then the risk management and compliance teams should be primarily there to educate, to build the culture, to educate people and to support them, and to be a source of reference. We want to take this risk. What's the best way we can do it? And then the third line, that kind of audit, almost from the outside looking in, should be there to give people confidence that they're doing it right and some ideas about how they can make ongoing improvements to the process, rather than where it is in too many organizations, where the first line is either fighting shy of taking risks, or alternatively taking too many risks and not really thinking about it. So the risk management team have to rein them in, and the audit have to slap their wrists. Well, that, I mean, I don't want to work for that company. Don't know about you. I don't know whether you want to build Pirani in that picture, but I'm fairly sure that you don't.
Okay, so where we're running out of time, is already 1 hour, so we want to be respectful of your time. Just and last, this is not like a question for you, Mike, but some assistant tell that if we're gonna translate this webinar to Spanish, maybe you're connecting from Latin America, so this specific webinar won't be translated to Spanish, but we have plenty of content in Spanish for the Latin American community. So we can send you some like this kind of content in Spanish, so to you to consult, but this was specifically for the English speaking markets. So yeah, that being said, thank you very much, Mike, for your time and your presentation. Also to mention that we're going to send you the recording of this webinar on also the presentation, and you can also again can download the kit that Mike prepared for us. So thank you very much for the assistance, and of course, thank you very much, Mike. So where can they find you if they want to hear more from you?
So the best place, and I'll for anyone who's hanging on, I'll post something in the chat. But the best place to find me personally is on LinkedIn. I am just LinkedIn.in.Mike Clayton or /Mike Clayton, or onlinepmcourses.com for the business, and the YouTube channel.
Great. Okay, I put the YouTube channel in the chat right before. So thank you very much, all the assistants. And of course, thank you very much, Dr. Mike. I hope to see you soon again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.